Do you remember the wildfire that ravaged the Amazon rainforest in 2020? Or, closer home, the cloudburst in Uttarakhand in 2013, which washed away thousands of lives? Climate change is real. It has now become an integral part of our lives. Countering the impact of climate change requires urgent, concerted efforts.
Climate change is here to stay, we cannot deny that. One of the reasons for this is our consumption of fossil fuel and various other related activities based on fossil fuel. Now we have to transit from that kind of consumption pattern to more renewable energy based consumption. The question is how just that transition could be. We have to involve communities. They should be part of the solutions. They are certainly not part of the problem. Kurtz International has taken up this agenda. I am confident that we are going to contribute towards India's commitments towards mitigating climate change.
A major step towards climate mitigation is an overhaul of the energy sector. This means a transition from conventional fossil fuel based energy to greener, cleaner, and sustainable options. Global leaders, governments, corporates, and industries have realized that in order to achieve this transition, we must act now and we must act together. India has also made significant progress in its decarbonization efforts. From nationally determined contributions for the Paris Agreement to the Panchamrit at COP26. At Glasgow, Prime Minister Modi announced a 5-point strategy which India would adopt for climate mitigation. However, we must not forget that energy is the indispensable force that drives all economic activities. What we need to see is at what cost is this energy being produced. If policies focus on maximum use of natural resources for economic development, this will eventually propel environmental degradation and, in turn, affect public health and livelihoods. In such a scenario, it becomes necessary to focus on a sustainable energy sector to maintain the balance between development and environment. This is where the concept of just transition comes in. What is needed is long-term planning, focused investments, and deep respect for workers and their communities. When we talk about transition, we often tend to look at it from a narrow lens or a sectoral approach. However, enabling a just, inclusive, and sustainable transition in a sector so crucial requires a comprehensive approach. This is exactly what we wanted to capture in our project, and during our interactions with different stakeholders from diverse sources of generation, we realized that this is what is missing from the current transition strategy.
This project aimed at assessing the readiness of Indian states to embrace the much envisaged transition in the power generation sector. We included all relevant stakeholders like the government, the local community people, and the private players, and then placed the community at the very core of this entire discourse.
Fossil fuels continue to account for approximately 60% of India's electricity generation portfolio. However, there has also been significant capacity additions of renewable sources such as solar, hydro, and wind. The central and state governments have been developing conducive policies and making significant budgetary allocations, including PLI schemes, to facilitate this transition.
If we look at the energy portfolios of both the sample states, Rajasthan and West Bengal, they are quite different, except for their common reliance on thermal power.
The northwestern state of Rajasthan is characterized by arid climate, dry terrain, and abundance of sunlight. This makes it an ideal choice for implementation of large-scale solar and wind-based generation projects. On the other hand, West Bengal's energy mix is characterized by a major dependence on coal-based thermal due to its proximity to coal mines. Apart from thermal, the state also has a significant hydropower potential which is currently being utilized in the form of mini, micro, small and large hydel projects.
So first of all, we identified different sources of energy generation in both the states, and then we visited these facilities. We could gather insights about what kind of business models that are available, technology availability, environmental compliances, the future plan, and an overall impact on the local community, economy, and environment.
Thermal power stations generate electricity by burning fossil fuels. Cost-effective and labor-intensive, this sector has been responsible for fueling the growth of the Indian economy. They also create an array of direct and indirect livelihood opportunities.
আমাদের ডাইরেক্ট এমপ্লয়মেন্ট এখন হচ্ছে পার মেগাওয়াট 2.5, সেন্ট্রাল গভর্নমেন্ট বলছে 0.5 মানে রেগুলার এমপ্লয়ি। আউটসোর্সিং যে কন্ট্রাক্টর ওয়ার্কার, এই ওয়ার্কারকে যদি আমরা ইনভলভ করি তাহলে এখনো পর্যন্ত পার মেগাওয়াট আমাদের ম্যান পাওয়ার লাগে হচ্ছে 2.5।
These power stations tend to match their scale of operations in their community development activities.
থার্মাল পাওয়ার প্ল্যান্টের পক্ষ থেকে আমরা সোশ্যাল ডেভেলপমেন্টের জন্য অনেকগুলো অ্যাক্টিভিটিস করে থাকি, যেমন লোকাল এমপ্লয়মেন্ট জেনারেশন করি, তাদেরকে ট্রেনিং দিয়ে তাদের লোকাল কোঅপারেটিভ সিস্টেম তৈরি করে কোঅপারেটিভের মাধ্যমে আমরা তাদেরকে ওখানে এমপ্লয়মেন্ট দিই। স্কুলগুলোকে ডেভেলপমেন্টের বিল্ডিং তৈরি করে দিচ্ছি।
The main challenge faced by thermal power stations across the country is management of environmental impacts while remaining economically viable. Burning coal to generate electricity leads to emission of poisonous gases responsible for air pollution. To counter or reduce these impacts, the power plants have to invest in expensive technology such as flue gas desulfurization plants and electrostatic precipitators. Second to coal is a thermal power plant's requirement of water. Water is required for generation of steam to fuel the turbines and simultaneously to cool the steam coming out of the boilers. The water intensity of the power plants may pose as a challenge in water-scarce regions of the country. The water discharged from the plants can also be a threat to the aquatic ecosystem if its temperature is not appropriately controlled. The most challenging environmental compliance issue being faced by thermal power plants these days is fly ash and bottom ash management. Poor ash pond management may lead to overflow of ash, causing health issues for communities living close to the ponds.
আমাদের এমটিবিএস কারখানা থেকে 1 ইঞ্চি দূরে আমাদের গ্রামের পাশেই অ্যাশ পন্ড 300 মিটার দূরে গ্রাম থেকে। যেমন ছাই জল গ্রামের পাশ দিয়ে বয়ে যাচ্ছে, মাটির তলায় যাচ্ছে, পানীয় জল নষ্ট হচ্ছে। মানে এই বর্ষার সময় হয়, ছাই ড্যাম ভেঙে চাষ জমিতে গোটাই পড়ে থাকে, গোচারণ ভূমি নেই। আমরাও তো বিভিন্ন রোগে আক্রান্ত, জ্বর, সর্দি, কাশি বা স্কিনের বিভিন্ন প্রবলেম রয়েছে।
When we talk about thermal power plants, it becomes necessary to talk about the coal economy as well. This is because the coal economy works as a complete value chain, and a transition away from coal will affect the entire ecosystem from the mine workers to the power plants and allied industries. The coal economy is a very significant hub of employment generation, with 7 districts in India having over 1 lakh direct and indirect coal mining and coal-based power plant jobs. The mine developer and operator agencies are also involved in the socio-economic development of the local communities in the project-affected areas.
Coal mining communities গুলোর মধ্যে, so the families are attached, their children are attached, some of them follow the same profession, some people don't and they go ahead. But ওদের একটা কালচার একটা আছে। নাও সাডেনলি ওদেরকে যদি বলা হয় আমরা যদি এই মাইনিংটাকে আমরা ডাউন স্কেল করবো, হয়তো ক্লোজও করবো, then it creates a little bit of an issue.
On the other hand, mining activities lead to loss of forest cover, land, and livelihoods associated with it. Villages are uprooted and communities dependent on forest-based livelihoods are significantly affected.
आम आदमी की जिंदगी जो है इतनी दुश्वार हो चली है कि 60 से ऊपर एवरेज लाइफ ही नहीं है।
तो जो कोयले का जो खनन हो रहा है और दोहन हो रहा है, और वहाँ का जो खुदाई होने के बाद कोयले का वहाँ को समतलीकरण नहीं किया जा रहा है, तो वहाँ पे बहुत सारी जो जमीनें हैं वो खाली पड़ी हुई हैं, उनका कोई उपयोग नहीं हो रहा है और हमारा जो कृषि जगत जो है वो पूरा प्रभावित हो चुका है।
It is established that thermal will eventually need to be phased out since the social and environmental costs of it are much higher than the economic benefits. But what about renewables? We know the tremendous potential of renewable energy, but what are the challenges? Solar radiation in the form of sunlight is captured and converted into electric energy through photovoltaic panels. It is currently being implemented in a ground-mounted, rooftop and floating form in different capacities across the country. With solar capacity increasing multifold in the last few years and tariff being brought down to a record low, this form of renewable energy is said to be a front-runner in India's clean energy transition. One of the major drawbacks of solar is the unavailability of solar radiation at night, coupled with the current lack of energy storage infrastructure in the country. Solar generation is dependent on climatic conditions and is more suitable for dry and sunny regions.
सोलर के हिसाब से जो एक मेन ऑब्जेक्टिव यहाँ पे जो मेन इंग्रेडिएंट है वो है बड़े लैंड चंक्स का, वो हमारे राजस्थान में काफी है और उसी के हिसाब से हमारे यहाँ पे 142 गीगावाट्स का यानी 1,42,000 मेगावाट जो है उसका पोटेंशियल यहाँ पे सोलर का है और 1,27,000 मेगावाट का विंड पोटेंशियल है। पूरे इंडिया के हिसाब से अगर हम बात करें तो करीब 20% पोटेंशियल जो है वो राजस्थान में ही है।
Setting up of photovoltaic panels requires a huge investment in land, which tends to create a land use conflict, especially for agriculture, cattle grazing, and allied activities.
मेरे गांव के अंदर ही 765 केवी का जीएसएस बना है। हमें तो बहुत बड़ी खुशी हुई कि हम इसके लिए हमें कुछ डेवलपमेंट मिलेगा, लेकिन आज वहाँ पे देखा जाए तो इतने पेड़ों को नष्ट किया है कि वहाँ सोलर प्लांट लगे हैं। अच्छा लगा रहा होगा, लेकिन उसको पूरा सत्यानाश किया जाए। एक पौधा क्या होता है, एक पौधे की कीमत क्या होती है। 400-500 साल पुराने पेड़, खेजड़ियों के जो पेड़ हैं वो रातों रात काटे जा रहे हैं, लेकिन उसके एक पौधा भी नहीं लगाया है आज तक।
While solar plants require bare minimum operation and maintenance, they require water for cleaning the panels. In water-scarce regions of the country, this may result in distortion of the groundwater table. In some areas, the establishment of solar plants has resulted in a conflict with the natural flora and fauna of the region.
हमारा डर सर इसमें से जो मेन डर है हमारा वाइल्ड लाइफ से तो जुड़ा हुआ कि बर्ड्स हमारी डेली मर रही है। जियो टैक्स के साथ में आपको बर्ड्स की बता सकते हैं पर डे 5 से 10 बर्ड्स तो मिल ही जाती है हमें मरी हुई।
Employment in a solar plant is limited to maintenance and ancillary activities since the entire process is automated.
The scope of manpower being, retrained and reused in solar is very limited, unfortunately.
The process of converting the kinetic energy in wind into mechanical energy generates wind power. Similar to solar, wind power generation requires certain prerequisites in terms of climatic conditions and terrain, making it unviable for mass-scale adoption. However, almost 80% of the components of wind power plants are locally manufactured, making it an ideal source of rural employment and MSME development. Setting up of wind solar parks in ecologically sensitive areas and installation of power transmission lines have a huge impact on the lives and natural habitat of flora and fauna of the region.
ग्रेट इंडियन बस्टर्ड जो है या फिर दूसरे भी जो उड़ने वाले बड़े बर्ड्स है उसमें थोड़ा सा उनको स्पेस चाहिए, एयर स्पेस। जैसे बड़े बर्ड्स होते हैं उनको उड़ने के टाइम और नीचे आते टाइम जैसे फ्लाइट होता है वैसे ही थोड़ा टाइम लगता है टेक ऑफ एंड लैंडिंग के लिए। तो सबसे ज्यादा इशू होता है उनके उस टाइम पे जब वो उतरते हैं या चढ़ते हैं तो उनके जो हड्डियां हैं वो हड्डियां हल्की होने की वजह से अगर उनको थोड़ा भी धक्का लग गया, एक बार भी अगर कोलिजन हो गया तो वो रिकवरी बहुत मुश्किल होती है।
Small, mini and micro hydropower plants are mostly run-of-the-river schemes which utilize the natural flow of water for generating electricity. These projects are ideal for decentralized generation in remote hilly locations where it helps in development of local communities and the overall area around it. The main challenge with these plants is that they are dependent on running water, making it difficult for them to cater to peak load during lean periods.
আমাদের হাইডেল সেক্টরটা বেসিক্যালি হয় কি বর্ষাকালে জলটা থাকে, মনসুনে জল পাবো, বাকি সময় জল পাবো না, খুব কম থাকে জল। আর এগুলো বেস লোড হিসেবেই চলে, পিক লোড হিসেবে চলে না।
The remoteness of location also brings about challenges of transportation, access, and communication. Hydel plants require a considerable amount of land for establishing their various components, including the forebay, penstock, and powerhouse.
এইখানে যে কাজ করতে গিয়ে যে অসুবিধাটা হয় মেইনলি হচ্ছে ল্যান্ড অ্যাকুইজিশন, আর পাহাড়ে মেন হচ্ছে গিয়ে স্লাইডটা তো মেন ফ্যাক্টর, ওখানে রোড তৈরি করাটা একটা বিশাল প্রবলেম হয়।
The dams which are constructed over the rivers lead to a rise in the water level and aggravate the problem of siltation. Pumped hydro storage is a unique model offering natural, large-scale and cost-effective energy storage solution to provide grid parity. It uses a system of two interconnected reservoirs with elevation difference between them.
এখন ডিসিএল এর যে পুরুলিয়া পাম্প স্টোরেজটা যেটা করে, এখন পিক টু অফ পিক ম্যানেজমেন্টটা করে। অ্যাকচুয়ালি থার্মালের ইউনিটগুলোকে ব্যাকডাউন করা যায় না, আমাদের যখন লোড কমে যায় তখন ও কী করে, এক্সেস পাওয়ারটাকে নিয়ে ও স্টোর করে লোয়ার ড্যাম থেকে আপার ড্যামে জলটা পাম্প করে রেখে দেয় ফর নেক্সট জেনারেশন। আবার যখন আমাদের পিক আসে তখন ওই আপার ড্যাম থেকে জলটা নিচে নামিয়ে নেওয়া হয়, জেনারেশন দিয়ে তখন ও গ্রিডে পাওয়ারটা দেয়।
Constructing a pump storage model requires an average of 10 to 15 years, making it an ideal employment generator during that period. However, this does not require a huge retinue of manpower for operation and maintenance. In Purulia, the pump storage project has been responsible for fostering tourism because of the dams that have been built for the project. The forest land which has been taken up for the project has led to the loss of ancient flora and fauna as well as forest-based livelihoods of the tribal communities residing over there.
প্রকৃতিগত দিক দিয়ে যদি আমি ধরি, প্রকৃতির জঙ্গল ধ্বংস হয়েছে, প্রকৃতির বন্যপ্রাণী বিলুপ্ত হয়ে গেছে, প্রকৃতির মানুষকে রাখার যে অক্সিজেন সেটা কমে গেছে, এবং মানুষের যে কমিউনিটির ধর্মগত, সাংস্কৃতিক, সামাজিকগত, অর্থনৈতিকগতভাবে এফেক্ট পড়ে গেছে।
Transition cannot be explained in a binary fashion between the two extremes of 0 and 1. Following our extensive literature review and interactions with all relevant stakeholders, we could gather insights and narratives from all sections, and that made us better equipped, better positioned to work on developing strategic roadmap for both the states, which basically talk about the best possible just way to facilitate energy transition.
Moving to a low carbon democracy through 3 simultaneous shifts: new energy systems, new mobility systems, and new communication systems is advisable. State-specific energy mix for enabling the transition is imperative. On one hand, Rajasthan could continue to focus on solar deployment at the utility and decentralized level, along with wind-based generation. On the other hand, West Bengal could focus on mini, micro hydel and tidal energy, as well as development of energy storage facilities like pumped storage. The government should be the front runner in the envisaged clean energy transition and adopt an inclusive approach to take into consideration the stake of the environment, communities, and industry. Introducing stakeholder consultations as an integral part of the project planning and implementation process is important for facilitating a community-driven and inclusive transition. Detailed assessment of the socio-environmental risks of the alternative energy sources is required to decide the right mix of conventional and alternative energy generation for facilitating a just, inclusive, and sustainable transition. Energy subsidies should be streamlined and directed towards stakeholders who need them the most. Additionally, awareness generation for availing such subsidies is the need of the hour. Incorporating clean energy standards in all verticals of the economy, including manufacturing, infrastructure, and service sector, is crucial for creating an enabling ecosystem for the required energy transition. Developing technology and infrastructure for energy storage, including battery storage, pumping, and microgrids, is critical for maintaining grid stability and integrating renewable options in the energy mix. Adequate emphasis should be given on the careful drafting and implementation of policies for rehabilitation and resettlement, labor welfare, community development, and environmental compliances. A just transition must look into the employment generation potential of a clean energy regime, supporting livelihoods through micro-entrepreneurship, decentralized schemes, small businesses with a focus on gender and environment should be emphasized upon.
আমার কাছে মনে হয় এই রিনিউয়েবল এনার্জির দিকে আমি যাব কি না এর প্রথম ট্রানজিশনটা বোধহয় আমাদের ভাবনা থেকে, আমাদের সাংস্কৃতিক চিন্তা ভাবনা থেকে, আমাদের জীবনযাপনের ধরন থেকে শুরু করতে হবে।
We need a fair transition. I'm not saying everything has to be just, because justice is a very difficult and a very an abstract concept. What is just for me may not be just for you. But it should be fair. It should be fair, meaning between two of us or three of us, all of us should gain something out of it.